When undercover FBI agent Nathaniel Reed is tasked with exposing a luxury fashion company's dark secret, he infiltrates a world of glitz, glamour, and unimaginable greed. But the further he digs, the more dangerous it becomes. Together with Olivia Morgan, a designer who begins to see the cracks in the empire she helped build, they risk everything to uncover a truth that powerful forces would kill to protect. Time is running out, and the closer they get to the truth, the more perilous their mission becomes. Before we get started, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more exciting content, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Now, let's dive in. Nathaniel Reed sat in the leather chair of a dimly lit conference room, his hands resting on a closed file that had his new assignment stamped in bold letters across it. The silence between him and his supervisor was thick, an unspoken tension hanging in the air. Nathaniel had handled many cases during his time as an undercover FBI agent, but this one was different, and he could feel it. He was about to step into a world that was foreign to him, where appearances were everything, and the truth was buried deep beneath layers of deception. The supervisor, a man of few words and many years of experience, cleared his throat and began pacing the room. "You've seen your fair share of corruption, Reed, but this time it's not Wall Street. It's not corporate fraud. It's the fashion industry. And make no mistake, this is going to be just as dirty, if not dirtier." Nathaniel leaned back, his brow furrowing in disbelief. "Fashion? You're saying we're investigating a fashion company?" "Not just any fashion company," the supervisor responded, pausing to hand Nathaniel a set of documents. "This is one of the largest and most influential in the world. Their name is synonymous with luxury, wealth, and power. But behind the glittering runways and glossy magazines, they're exploiting workers on a scale we've rarely seen. It's beyond just labor violations. There's racial profiling, discrimination, and a deeply ingrained system that keeps the most vulnerable workers in perpetual fear." Nathaniel flipped through the file, his eyes scanning photos of the company's lavish headquarters, celebrity endorsements, and news articles praising their latest collections. It was hard to believe that such a renowned brand could be involved in something so sinister. But Nathaniel knew better than to trust appearances. Beneath the surface of any glamorous operation, there was often a rot that no one wanted to acknowledge. "I'm going undercover?" he asked, already knowing the answer, but needing to hear it aloud. The supervisor nodded. "You'll be working as an assistant manager in their production department. It's where most of the exploitation happens, but it's also where the company is most careful about covering its tracks. You'll need to get close to the workers, find out what's really going on, and figure out who's responsible. The company's been tipped off that something's not right, so they're on edge. You'll have to move fast but tread carefully." Nathaniel nodded slowly, processing the weight of the assignment. This was no ordinary case of corporate greed. It was a world of luxury that thrived on the suffering of those far removed from the spotlight. A world where discrimination wasn't just incidental but central to the way business was done. "And there's one more thing," the supervisor added, dropping another file on the table. "Olivia Morgan. She's one of their top designers. From what we've gathered, she's not fully aware of the extent of the company's practices, but she's not completely innocent either. She's kept her head down, maybe out of fear for her career, but we think she might become an asset to you. If you can earn her trust, she might help you get closer to the truth." Nathaniel picked up the file on Olivia Morgan, studying her photo. She looked poised, with sharp features and eyes that hinted at an inner strength. Her career trajectory was impressive, rising from obscurity to become one of the most sought-after designers in the industry. Yet there was something about her file that suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable with the way things were done at the company. "I'll need to be careful with her," Nathaniel murmured, half to himself. "If she's in the dark about what's going on, pushing too hard could backfire." The supervisor nodded. "Exactly, but she's your best bet for getting inside the company's inner circle. Build trust, but don't expose too much. And remember, Reed, this assignment is going to test you in ways you're not used to. Fashion isn't just about clothes. It's about power, perception, and manipulation. And in this world, the truth is often the last thing people want to see." As Nathaniel left the office that day, the gravity of his task weighed heavily on his mind. He was stepping into a world where appearances meant everything, but the reality was something far darker. He had faced powerful criminals before, but this was different. This was a world that thrived on secrecy, where those in power built empires on the backs of the invisible. And now it was up to him to uncover the truth. Walking out into the bustling streets, Nathaniel took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the city around him. The fashion industry was all about creating illusions of beauty, wealth, and perfection. But Nathaniel wasn't interested in illusions. He was there to expose the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. Olivia Morgan stood in front of the full-length mirror in her office, studying her reflection. Her latest collection had just been approved for production, and she should have felt elated. This was what she had worked so hard for. Years of late nights, sacrifices, and navigating the cutthroat world of fashion. But instead of pride, all she felt was an overwhelming sense of unease. The sketches for her collection were spread out across her desk, and while they were undoubtedly beautiful, they felt hollow. The creativity she had once poured into her designs had been replaced by the demands of executives, the pressure to stay relevant, and the constant need to meet unrealistic deadlines. The fashion industry wasn't about art anymore. It was about survival. She sat down, staring at the designs she had once been so excited about. Her thoughts drifted to the factory she had visited just last week. She had been sent there to oversee the final stages of production, to ensure that the garments met the high standards of their brand. But what she had seen there had shaken her. The workers, mostly women, toiled in near silence, their faces worn with exhaustion and fear. The conditions were appalling. Dimly lit rooms, sweltering heat, and the ever-present gaze of supervisors ensuring no one slowed down. Olivia had tried to ignore the nagging feeling in her gut, the one that told her something was deeply wrong. After all, what could she do? She wasn't the one in charge of the factories. She was just a designer, a cog in a much larger machine. But that didn't stop the guilt from gnawing at her. She had grown up in a working-class family, her parents struggling to make ends meet after emigrating in search of a better life. They had worked hard, just like those factory workers. And now, Olivia was part of a system that treated people, just like her parents, as nothing more than tools to be used and discarded. A knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. Olivia? Charlotte, her boss and the company's head of operations, stood in the doorway. We've got a new assistant manager starting today. I need you to get him up to speed. Olivia forced a smile, pushing her dark thoughts aside. Of course. What's his name? Nathaniel Reed. He'll be reporting to you for now, so make sure he understands how things work around here. Charlotte's tone was businesslike as always. She didn't have time for pleasantries or small talk, and Olivia had learned long ago that it was best not to challenge her. When Charlotte left, Olivia sighed, leaning back in her chair. She didn't have time to babysit a new employee, but there was no point in complaining. That was the way things worked in the fashion industry. You did what you were told, kept your head down, and hoped that one day you'd have enough power to make your own rules. Later that afternoon, Nathaniel Reed walked into her office. Olivia's first impression was that he didn't look like someone who belonged in fashion. He was tall, with a ruggedness that seemed out of place in the polished, pristine world she inhabited. There was something in his eyes, though, something sharp and observant. He wasn't like the other assistants she had worked with before. Hi, I'm Nathaniel, he said, extending his hand. Olivia Morgan, she replied, shaking his hand and offering a polite smile. Welcome to the team. Nathaniel smiled back, but there was something guarded about him, as if he was already sizing up the situation. Olivia couldn't quite put her finger on it, but there was an air of mystery around him. She didn't know whether to trust him or keep her distance. I'll show you around, and we can go over what you'll be doing, she said, leading him through the design floor. As they walked, Olivia found herself glancing at Nathaniel, wondering what his story was. He didn't seem intimidated by the fast-paced environment, nor did he appear particularly interested in the glitz and glamour that surrounded them. Most new employees were overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the operation, but Nathaniel was different. He was calm, almost too calm. "So what brought you to the fashion industry?" she asked, trying to make conversation. Nathaniel shrugged, his expression unreadable. "I've always been interested in how things work behind the scenes. Figured this would be an interesting change of pace." Olivia nodded, though she wasn't entirely convinced. There was something about him that didn't add up. But she had learned not to pry. In this industry, everyone had secrets, and sometimes it was best to leave them buried. As she continued showing Nathaniel around, Olivia's thoughts drifted back to the factory workers. She had a feeling that whatever was happening behind the scenes at the company was much darker than she had originally thought. And for some reason, she had a nagging suspicion that Nathaniel Reed was going to play a much bigger role in uncovering those secrets than she could have ever imagined. The fashion house was a monument to luxury. Its towering windows glittered under the sunlight, reflecting the success and power of the company to anyone passing by. Inside, mannequins dressed in the latest high-end designs lined the hallways, a testament to the company's creative prowess. It was all an illusion, Nathaniel thought, as he navigated through the sleek corridors of his new workplace. Behind the glamour, there were stories no one talked about. Stories of exploitation, manipulation, and discrimination. Nathaniel had been at the company for a few weeks now, and the deeper he dove into his role as an assistant manager in the production department, the more he realized how carefully constructed the facade of the fashion house truly was. On the surface, everything appeared to be running smoothly. Executives held meetings in glossy boardrooms. Designers worked tirelessly on collections that would grace the runways of the world, and the company's marketing campaigns screamed inclusivity and ethical business practices. But the cracks were starting to show. The workers in the production department, many of whom were from marginalized backgrounds, operated under an oppressive cloud of fear. They weren't the glamorous designers or the headlining figures that adorned the covers of magazines. These were the people who worked behind the scenes, unseen and unheard, stitching together the pieces of a narrative they were never allowed to participate in. Nathaniel made it a point to talk to these workers whenever he could, carefully balancing his role as an undercover agent with his need to gather information. The workers were cautious at first, avoiding eye contact and offering clipped answers whenever he tried to engage them in conversation. It was clear they had been conditioned to keep their heads down and their mouths shut. Over time, though, as Nathaniel continued to observe, he began to see the depth of their fear. The company had perfected the art of manipulation. They kept workers just comfortable enough to avoid outright rebellion, but made sure the threat of losing everything loomed over them constantly. The workers were paid just enough to survive, but never enough to build a future. They were offered temporary contracts, which could be revoked at any time, making them feel as though they were walking on eggshells. Most of the workers were immigrants or from disadvantaged communities, and many had nowhere else to turn. For them, this job was their only lifeline, and the company exploited that desperation at every turn. One afternoon, Nathaniel struck up a conversation with a young woman named Rosa. She was quiet and shy, but her eyes held a certain sadness that Nathaniel couldn't ignore. She had been working at the company for several years, longer than most of the others in the department. Her hands, rough and calloused from hours of stitching and cutting fabric, were proof of the hard work she put in every day. But despite her loyalty and dedication, Rosa was still a temporary worker, living with the constant fear of losing her job. "How long have you been here?" Nathaniel asked casually as they both worked in the production area. "Too long," Rosa replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She glanced around nervously, making sure no one was listening. Nathaniel could tell she was scared. "You seem good at what you do. They should make you permanent." Rosa scoffed softly, shaking her head. "They don't care about us. We're just here to keep things moving. As long as the clothes get made, it doesn't matter who does the work." There was a bitterness in her tone that Nathaniel recognized. It was the kind of resentment that came from years of being treated as less than human, from knowing that no matter how hard you worked, you were never going to be valued. "They don't give us much choice," Rosa continued. "It's either this or nothing. Most of us, We can't afford to lose this job, even though it feels like we're losing a piece of ourselves every day we're here. Nathaniel felt a pang of guilt. He was undercover, playing a role in this twisted system, but he knew he had the privilege of walking away once his mission was complete. Rosa and the others weren't so lucky. For them, this was their reality, one they couldn't escape. As Nathaniel dug deeper, he began to uncover more about the systemic discrimination at play. The company, despite its public image of inclusivity, seemed to have a deliberate practice of keeping certain groups of people in low-level positions. The production department was filled with workers of color, immigrants, and those from disadvantaged backgrounds, while the upper echelons of the company were dominated by a wealthy, homogeneous group who rarely interacted with the workers below them. The stark divide between those who created the fashion and those who profited from it was undeniable. The workers were the backbone of the company, yet they were invisible, forgotten in the shadows of the bright lights that illuminated the runways. Olivia Morgan, the designer Nathaniel had been assigned to work under, was one of the few people who seemed to operate in both worlds. She was part of the glamorous side of the business, but had enough of a conscience to see that something wasn't right. In their time working together, Nathaniel noticed that Olivia was more thoughtful than her colleagues. She didn't have the same callousness or detachment that the others exhibited when it came to the workers. In fact, Olivia seemed almost conflicted at times, as if she knew what was happening but wasn't sure how to confront it. One day, after a particularly stressful meeting about a new collection, Olivia pulled Nathaniel aside. She looked tired, the usual spark in her eyes dimmed by the weight of her conscience. "Nathaniel," she said quietly, "do you ever feel like we're all just pretending? Like this whole place is a performance, and no one wants to admit that it's all built on lies?" Nathaniel raised an eyebrow, surprised by her sudden vulnerability. "What do you mean?" Olivia sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I've been here for years. I've seen how this company operates, how they treat the workers. I try to ignore it, to focus on my designs, but I don't know. Lately it's been harder to look the other way." Her words lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. Nathaniel could see that Olivia was grappling with something deeper than just the day-to-day stresses of the job. She was beginning to see the cracks in the company's facade, just as he had. "I get what you're saying," Nathaniel said carefully, aware that he had to play his role without revealing too much. "It's tough to see how things really work behind the scenes. But maybe that's why people like you are important. You have the power to change things." Olivia looked at him, a hint of skepticism in her eyes. "Change things? People like me? I'm just a designer. I don't have any real power here." Nathaniel smiled slightly. "You'd be surprised how much power someone like you can have. It's not always about being at the top. Sometimes the people who see things clearly are the ones who can make the biggest impact." Olivia didn't respond immediately, but Nathaniel could tell his words had struck a chord. She was on the brink of something. An awakening, perhaps. And though she didn't know it yet, Olivia Morgan was going to play a crucial role in the unraveling of this company's dark secrets. As Nathaniel walked away from their conversation, he knew the clock was ticking. The deeper he got into his investigation, the more dangerous it became. The company's leaders were getting suspicious, tightening their control over the workers, and watching for anyone who might be stepping out of line. Nathaniel could feel the tension rising. The glamorous world he had stepped into was beginning to crumble, and soon the truth would have to come to light, no matter the cost. The atmosphere in the office had shifted. Tension hung in the air like a heavy fog, and it wasn't just the usual pre-show anxiety. Something deeper was brewing, something Nathaniel could sense with each passing day. His cover as an assistant manager gave him access to most areas of the company, and he had spent countless hours observing the subtle dynamics at play. The closer he got to the truth, the more dangerous the situation became. Rumors of an internal investigation had started to circulate. Some employees were whispering about increased surveillance, while others mentioned the sudden dismissal of a few outspoken workers. It was clear that the company was tightening its grip, and anyone who questioned the status quo was at risk. Nathaniel had to be careful. His identity as an undercover agent was still intact, but the company's leadership was growing paranoid. The walls were closing in and he needed to act fast. Olivia had been quiet lately. After their conversation about the company's darker side, she seemed distant, as if she were struggling with something internally. Nathaniel could tell that she was starting to question everything she had once accepted, but the fear of jeopardizing her career kept her silent. He knew that pushing her too hard could backfire, but he also recognized that Olivia was key to unraveling the company's corruption. She was in a unique position, close enough to the higher-ups to have access to critical information, but still empathetic enough to care about the people the company was exploiting. One evening, as Nathaniel was preparing to leave the office, he received an unexpected message from Olivia. It was brief, asking him to meet her at a small cafe near the office after work. Something in her tone felt urgent, and Nathaniel knew this wasn't just a casual conversation. When Nathaniel arrived at the cafe, Olivia was already seated in a corner, nursing a cup of tea. She looked different, more vulnerable, her usual confidence replaced by an unmistakable tension. Nathaniel sat down across from her, watching as she fidgeted with her cup, her gaze darting around the room as if she were afraid of being watched. "I wasn't sure if you'd come," Olivia said quietly, her voice barely audible over the low hum of the cafe. "Of course I would," Nathaniel replied, his tone calm and reassuring. "What's going on, Olivia? You seem worried." She glanced at him, her eyes betraying the turmoil she was feeling. "Nathaniel, something's not right. I've been noticing things. People getting fired for no reason, workers disappearing from the production floor without explanation. And today I overheard a conversation between two executives. They were talking about an investigation, something they're trying to keep quiet." Nathaniel's heart raced. This was exactly what he had suspected, but hearing it confirmed from someone on the inside brought a new sense of urgency to the situation. "What did they say?" Olivia hesitated for a moment, as if weighing the risks of telling him. "They didn't say much, but it was clear that they know something's going on. They're paranoid, Nathaniel. They're tightening control, and they're watching everyone. I don't know who they think is behind it, but—" She trailed off, her eyes meeting Nathaniel's with a look of desperation. "I'm scared, Nathaniel. I don't know who to trust anymore." Nathaniel leaned forward, his voice steady. "You can trust me, but you need to be careful. If they suspect you know something, they'll come after you." Olivia nodded, her fingers trembling slightly as she set down her cup. "I can't keep pretending like I don't see what's happening. I've ignored it for too long, but now I feel like I'm part of the problem if I don't do something." Nathaniel saw the conflict in her eyes, the battle between her conscience and her fear of losing everything she had worked for. He knew that convincing her to take action would be delicate, but time was running out. The company's leaders were getting more desperate by the day, and if Olivia didn't act soon, the opportunity to expose their corruption might be lost. "Olivia," Nathaniel began, his voice low and sincere, "I know this is hard, but if you want to make a difference, now's the time. You're in a position to help these workers, to stop what's happening, but you can't do it alone. I'm with you. We'll do this together." She looked at him, uncertainty flickering across her face. "But how? What can we do?" Nathaniel knew this was the moment to reveal more of his plan. He had been gathering evidence for weeks, documents, testimonies from workers, hidden camera footage from the production floor. But he needed Olivia's help to access the company's most sensitive information, the kind that would prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that they were engaging in illegal practices. "I've been doing some digging of my own," Nathaniel said carefully. "I've found some things. Proof that the company is exploiting workers, violating labor laws, and engaging in discriminatory practices. But I need your help to get more. You're close enough to the executives to know where the real dirt is buried." Olivia's eyes widened, realization dawning on her. "You've been investigating this. For how long?" Nathaniel hesitated for a moment, knowing that the next words out of his mouth would change everything between them. "Olivia, there's something you need to know. I'm not just an assistant manager. I'm an undercover agent with the FBI. I've been investigating the company for labor violations and discrimination. I didn't want to drag you into this, but now I don't have a choice." For a moment, Olivia was silent, processing what he had just told her. The shock in her eyes was undeniable, and Nathaniel could see the mix of emotions running through her. Betrayal, fear, and perhaps a glimmer of hope. You're with the FBI? Olivia whispered, her voice shaking. Why didn't you tell me? I couldn't, Nathaniel said softly. It was too risky. But now, things are moving fast, and we're running out of time. I need your help, Olivia. We can expose this, but I can't do it without you. Olivia sat back, her face pale. I don't know if I can trust you anymore. You've been lying to me this whole time. Nathaniel reached across the table, gently placing his hand on hers. I understand how you feel, and I don't blame you for being angry. But right now, we have a chance to do something important, to stop people from being hurt. This isn't just about me or you. It's about all the workers who are suffering because of this company. I need you to help me do what's right. Olivia stared at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face for any sign of deceit. Finally, she let out a slow breath, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Okay, she said quietly, I'll help you, but this isn't going to be easy. Nathaniel nodded, relief washing over him. I know, but together, we can do this. Over the next few days, Nathaniel and Olivia began working together in secret, gathering the final pieces of evidence they needed to expose the company's corrupt practices. Olivia used her position to access confidential documents, and Nathaniel continued to build his case, all the while staying one step ahead of the company's increasingly paranoid executives. As they delved deeper, the true scale of the company's exploitation became clear. It wasn't just labor violations. It was a carefully orchestrated system of discrimination that kept certain workers trapped in a cycle of poverty and fear. The company's leaders had been profiting off the backs of marginalized communities for years, all while hiding behind a polished public image of inclusivity and social responsibility. The deeper they went, the more dangerous it became. Nathaniel knew that if they were caught, both he and Olivia would face serious consequences. But they were past the point of no return. In the end, they managed to gather enough evidence to make their case. The final piece of the puzzle was a set of internal emails that Olivia had accessed, which showed the company's top executives discussing how to cover up their illegal practices. With this evidence in hand, Nathaniel knew they had what they needed to take the company down. But as they prepared to make their move, the company's leadership struck first. A sudden round of firing swept through the production department, and Nathaniel knew it was only a matter of time before they came for him and Olivia. The tension reached a breaking point, and Nathaniel and Olivia realized that they had to act immediately, or everything they had worked for would be lost. The tension was palpable as Nathaniel Reed and Olivia Morgan sat together in the quiet confines of her office late at night. The dim lighting barely illuminated the stack of damning documents and files spread across the desk. They were at the tipping point. Everything they had worked for, every piece of evidence they had risked their lives to gather, was ready. But so were the company's leaders. They could feel the tightening noose, and their paranoia was growing. They had started making moves to silence dissent, and Nathaniel and Olivia knew they were running out of time. Olivia's hands trembled as she picked up a flash drive containing the final piece of evidence, emails from the company's top executives exposing a system of racial profiling and worker exploitation on an unimaginable scale. It was all there in black and white, proof of how the company had carefully manipulated everything from hiring practices to contract renewals, ensuring that marginalized workers remained trapped in low-paying, dangerous jobs while the higher-ups reaped the rewards. Are you sure we're ready? Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The fear in her eyes was unmistakable, but so was the determination. Nathaniel, sitting across from her, nodded solemnly. We don't have a choice anymore. If we wait, they'll destroy everything. They've already started firing people, and it's only a matter of time before they come for us. Olivia's heart raced. She had known for a long time that the company she worked for was built on something corrupt, but she had never imagined the depth of the rot. Seeing it all laid out in front of her, the blatant exploitation, the cruelty, the lies, had shaken her to her core. And now, she was about to risk everything to bring it to light. I didn't think it would come to this, she said, her voice trembling. I thought I could just look the other way, that maybe it wasn't as bad as I feared." Nathaniel's expression softened. "You're doing the right thing, Olivia. What we're about to do isn't easy, but it's necessary. People are suffering because of this. We can't stand by and let it continue." Olivia nodded, though the weight of her decision hung heavy on her shoulders. She had built her career at this company, sacrificed years of her life to climb the ranks, and now she was about to tear it all down. But what choice did she have? She couldn't continue to be complicit in a system that profited from the exploitation of others. "We'll release everything tomorrow," Nathaniel said, his voice firm with resolve. "I've got contacts in the media, and we'll send all the evidence to the authorities. By the time they realize what's happening, it'll be too late for them to cover it up." The plan was simple, but the stakes were high. They had collected more than enough evidence to expose the company's illegal practices. But if they were discovered before they could release it, there would be severe consequences. The company had deep pockets and powerful allies, and they wouldn't go down without a fight. As the night wore on, Nathaniel and Olivia finalized their strategy. They would send the documents to multiple media outlets at the same time, ensuring that the story broke simultaneously across all major platforms. They would also provide the evidence to labor rights organizations and the authorities, giving them the tools they needed to launch an investigation. It was a well-coordinated effort, but it left little room for error. Just as they were preparing to leave, Olivia's phone buzzed on the desk. She glanced at the screen, her blood turning cold when she saw the message. "We know what you're doing. Stop now, or there will be consequences." Nathaniel looked over her shoulder at the message, his jaw tightening. "They're on to us." Olivia swallowed hard, her mind racing. "What do we do now? They know." Nathaniel remained calm, though he could feel the pressure mounting. "We move faster. We can't let fear stop us now. We've come too far." He grabbed his bag, making sure the flash drives and hard copies of the evidence were secure. "We split up. I'll take the media outlets, and you get the evidence to the authorities. We can't be seen together." Olivia nodded, though fear gnawed at her. This was real. They weren't just exposing a company. They were up against powerful people who wouldn't hesitate to protect their interests at any cost. But Nathaniel's confidence reassured her. They were in this together. As they prepared to leave, Olivia hesitated at the door. "Nathaniel, what if we don't make it in time? What if they stop us?" Nathaniel turned to her, his gaze steady. "Then we've already won. Because we didn't stay silent. They can't erase the truth once it's out there. We're not alone in this." With that, they parted ways, heading out into the night to deliver the evidence that would change everything. The next morning, chaos erupted across the media. Headlines blared the story of corruption, exploitation, and systematic discrimination at one of the world's most renowned fashion companies. News outlets scrambled to cover the unfolding scandal, while social media exploded with outrage. Workers from across the globe shared their stories of abuse, confirming the allegations in the documents Nathaniel and Olivia had leaked. It was a media storm unlike anything the company had ever faced, and they were woefully unprepared. Inside the company's headquarters, panic set in. Executives scrambled to control the damage, issuing statements of denial and trying to spin the narrative in their favor. But it was too late. The evidence was overwhelming, and the public's anger was palpable. Lawsuits were filed, investigations were launched, and the company's stock plummeted. Olivia watched the news unfold from her apartment, her heart pounding as she realized the enormity of what they had done. She had risked everything, and now the truth was out there for the world to see. But even as the company's leaders faced the consequences of their actions, Olivia knew that the real victory belonged to the workers, whose voices had finally been heard. Later that day, Nathaniel met with her, relief written across his face. "We did it." Olivia nodded, though the weight of it all still pressed on her. "Yeah, we did." Nathaniel smiled, but his eyes were serious. "I know this hasn't been easy, but you did the right thing, Olivia. You stood up when no one else would." Olivia sighed, her mind swirling with everything that had happened. "I just wish it didn't have to come to this, that we didn't have to fight so hard just to do what's right." Nathaniel placed a hand on her shoulder, offering her a quiet strength. "That's the world we live in. but it's people like you who make it better. As the days passed, the fallout from the scandal continued to spread. The company's leaders were removed, investigations into their practices deepened, and the workers who had been exploited for so long were finally given the justice they deserved. Olivia, though her career at the company was over, found herself filled with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. She had used her position to make a difference, and in doing so, she had changed not only the lives of the workers but her own. Nathaniel, having completed his mission, prepared to move on to his next assignment. But as he looked back at everything they had accomplished, he knew that this case would stay with him. It wasn't just about exposing corruption or bringing down a powerful company. It was about the people whose lives had been changed because of their courage. As they said their goodbyes, Olivia smiled, a sense of peace settling over her. "Thank you, Nathaniel, for everything." Nathaniel nodded, his usual stoic demeanor softening. "You don't need to thank me. You were the one who made this happen." And with that, they parted ways, knowing that the fight for justice was far from over, but also knowing that together, they had made a difference. The thread of justice had been pulled, and the fabric of corruption had unraveled, leaving behind a new hope for those who had once been invisible. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Click on the video now to watch. We appreciate your support, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.